What if the most intense, beautiful and earth-shattering feeling you've ever experienced, that rush of falling deeply in love, was actually a magnificent trick? A trick your own biology plays on you, designed for a purpose far removed from your personal happiness. It's a startling idea, I know, especially when you think about those moments, the racing heart, the feeling that you've finally found your other half, the conviction that this connection is unique, almost sacred. We build our lives around searching for it, celebrating it, mourning its loss. We tell ourselves it's about a meeting of souls. But imagine for a moment that behind this breathtaking facade, there's a colder, more ancient architect at work. This is the challenging vision offered by the philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer. He dared to suggest that romantic love, in all its passionate glory, isn't about soulmates or destined connections, beautiful as those ideas are. Instead, he saw it as nature's most ingenious strategy, a powerful evolutionary drive, a biological imperative designed to ensure one thing above all, that we as a species continue. That dizzying high, that feeling of being meant to be, the one that makes you believe this person completes you. Schopenhauer would gently, or perhaps not so gently, tell you it's a sophisticated illusion, a biological ruse designed to be almost irresistible. While you're lost in their eyes, utterly convinced you're seeing into the very depths of their soul, your most ancient instincts are performing a rapid unconscious audit, assessing genetic viability, looking for subtle cues of fertility, and calculating the potential for strong, surviving offspring. It's the oldest program in the book, really, wrapped in the irresistible allure of romance, compelling you towards a biological goal that your conscious mind, caught up in the magic, might not even realize is pulling the strings of your heart. And it's not just a one-way street. Schopenhauer observed that women, by the same token, often evaluate men based on indicators of status, security, and genetic quality. These aren't necessarily conscious, cold calculations, but deep-seated instincts honed over millennia. The notions of pure fairness or unwavering loyalty, as lovely as they sound, might take a back seat to these more fundamental drives. This creates a dynamic, a powerful interplay of pursuit and perceived attainment. There's this incredible, almost addictive thrill in the chase, isn't there? The longing, the striving, the feeling of getting closer to something you deeply desire. But what happens after the conquest, as Schopenhauer might put it? What happens when that intense pursuit reaches its apparent conclusion? Often, he noted, the magic begins to fade. The very thing that captivated you in its elusiveness can lose its sparkle once it's firmly in your grasp. He called this the tragedy of possession. That intoxicating desire, that chemical cocktail that spurred you on, starts to wane because its biological purpose, ensuring connection for potential procreation, has been, in a sense, fulfilled. And with that, often, her interest can also begin to cool. Not out of malice, but because the underlying evolutionary script is moving to its next phase. You see this play out in the modern dating world with almost painful clarity, don't you? Think about the dynamics on dating platforms. Statistics often highlight a pattern. A large percentage of female attention, something like 80%, tends to focus on a smaller percentage of men, often perceived as the top 20% in terms of status, attractiveness, or other perceived markers of value. It's a stark illustration of this selective principle at work. And how many relationships, born in a blaze of passionate intensity, crumble into confusion and hurt as soon as that initial fire burns down? The passion fades, and suddenly the foundations you thought were solid feel like sand. Even marriage, an institution society presents as the pinnacle of lifelong commitment and romantic devotion, isn't immune to these undercurrents. When the biological imperative has run its course, or when perceived value shifts, even the most solemn vows can be tested. For the spouse who remained devoted, perhaps overlooking these deeper currents, the end can be not just emotionally devastating, but financially ruinous, a harsh awakening from a dream they believed was real. Schopenhauer made some observations that can be difficult to hear, especially today. He suggested that women are often primarily driven by instinct and emotion. He noted that their perceived value in what he termed the sexual marketplace tends to peak relatively early, tied to outward signs of youth and beauty, which are, from a purely biological standpoint, indicators of fertility. Men, on the other hand, often find they must build their value over a longer period. It's less about the bloom of youth and more about demonstrating social standing, achieving financial stability, and cultivating psychological strength and resilience. This difference, he argued, creates the very foundation for what he termed a biological selection program. Women, guided by these ancient instincts, are naturally inclined to seek the most advantageous partner available to them, the one who seems to offer the best prospects for security and the success of potential offspring. And in this often unspoken, unacknowledged program, men who pour all their energy into selfless sacrifice, who offer devotion without a strategic understanding of these underlying dynamics, often find themselves on the losing end. They invest everything, hoping that pure goodness will be enough, only to discover that the rules of the game were different than they imagined. It's a tough pill to swallow, the idea that your deepest affections might be part of a biological script. Schopenhauer went further, with a warning that cuts to the quick. To be loved, he said, one must not be just, but clever. Think about that for a moment. How often have you seen or perhaps even experienced the good guy phenomenon? The man who believes that love is earned through unwavering service, through boundless kindness, through constant sacrifice. He operates on the assumption that if he just gives enough, cares enough, does enough, he will inevitably be cherished and loved in return. But this, Schopenhauer argued, is a fundamental misunderstanding of the currents that truly drive attraction. He wasn't dismissing kindness, but he was pointing out that women, or at least the instinctual part of them, are often more powerfully drawn to signals of strength. This isn't necessarily brute physical strength, though that can play a part, but more crucially, social dominance. The ability to navigate and influence social hierarchies, financial independence, the capacity to provide and secure resources, and psychological resilience, the inner fortitude that signals an ability to withstand life's challenges. These are the qualities that, from an evolutionary perspective, promise survival and prosperity. Mere kindness, if perceived as a lack of these other strengths, or worse, as a strategy for appeasement, often falls short. This whole dynamic, this game, as Schopenhauer might describe it, often puts the pursuer at a disadvantage. Think about it. If a woman's biological imperative, her deep-seated drive, is to secure the best possible partner, what happens once that goal is achieved with a particular individual? Once the chase is over and the connection is secured, that powerful evolutionary drive, having fulfilled its immediate objective, can naturally begin to seek new incentives, or its intensity simply diminishes. Her biological mission, in a sense, shifts. This is where you see the inherent power imbalance Schopenhauer pointed to. Women, in their role as the primary selectors in this biological marketplace, hold a certain kind of innate leverage. Men, by contrast, often find themselves in a position where they must actively demonstrate and fight for their value, to prove they are worthy of being selected. This isn't about blame. It's about understanding a dynamic that has been shaped over countless generations. And it's a dynamic that becomes even more complex and, frankly, more confusing in a society like ours. A society that champions equality and partnership, yet still operates often unconsciously under the influence of these ancient biological laws. We tell ourselves one story, the story of equal footing and shared romantic ideals, but the old programming, the primal instincts, are still running in the background, influencing our attractions, our choices, and ultimately, our satisfaction in relationships. Schopenhauer didn't mince words, and some of his descriptions can sound harsh to our modern ears. He characterized women as childish, frivolous, and short-sighted. Now, before you recoil, it's crucial to understand his context. He wasn't using these terms as mere insults or to denigrate women universally. Instead, he was attempting to highlight what he saw as their evolutionarily ingrained mode of operation, a tendency to act on present-moment incentives and emotions, a focus on the immediate rather than the distant future. He believed they possessed an almost uncanny, almost supernatural ability to read social cues, to understand and navigate emotional dynamics, sometimes in ways that could appear manipulative, but which he saw as part of their toolkit for navigating the world and securing their evolutionary objectives. Fast forward to our hyper-connected, rapidly changing modern world, a world of social media, endless dating apps, and constantly shifting gender expectations. In this new landscape, Schopenhauer might argue that men are frequently being outplayed. There's a pervasive societal narrative that praises emotional vulnerability in men, and indeed, genuine emotional expression is healthy. Yet, paradoxically, many women, while consciously appreciating such vulnerability, may still, on a more instinctual level, continue to prioritize and respond to signals of dominance, strength, and unwavering resolve. This creates a confusing double bind for men. Be open and vulnerable, but also be the unshakable rock. How many men do you know, or perhaps you've been this man yourself, who exhaust themselves striving to provide, to be everything they believe a partner wants, only to find themselves, when the relationship falters, facing not just heartbreak, but significant legal and financial penalties? It's a scenario that plays out with painful regularity. In this modern arena, Schopenhauer might observe that attention itself has been weaponized, turned into a form of currency. He would likely look at the phenomenon of simping, men excessively fawning over women online, often in exchange for fleeting moments of acknowledgement. As a stark example of this, a desperate seeking of validation that is, by its very nature, often ephemeral and ultimately unsatisfying because it's not rooted in genuine reciprocal value. Female love, Schopenhauer contended, is often fundamentally conditional. It hinges, he argued, on utility, on what a man provides, be it security, status, excitement, or genetic advantage. If a man stagnates, if he loses his perceived status, if his ability to provide diminishes, or if a seemingly better option appears, the conditional nature of that affection can become painfully apparent. She may, driven by that same deep-seated instinct to optimize, seek to replace him. He starkly illustrated this by dividing men into servants and servers, or perhaps we could translate it to modern terms like beta males and alpha males. The servants, he suggested, are those who exhaust themselves in the often fruitless chase, constantly trying to prove their worth through supplication and service. The servers, or the alphas on the other hand, are those who seem to effortlessly command attention and loyalty, not because they are necessarily nicer, but because they embody those core traits of strength, confidence, and resourcefulness that instinctually signal high value. Now, after hearing all this, you might be feeling a sense of bleakness, perhaps even anger or resentment. It can sound like a deeply cynical, even misogynistic view of the most profound human connection. But Schopenhauer's aim, as he saw it, was not to foster hatred or despair. His remedy was clarity. He urged men, and indeed all individuals, to see love and relationships not as a fairy tale, but as a form of negotiation, often an unspoken one, driven by these deep biological and psychological currents. The first step towards true empowerment, he believed, is to resist playing the game solely by rules set by others or by rules dictated by societal illusions that ignore these underlying truths. True liberation, the kind that brings lasting peace and a sense of self-possession, doesn't come from finally winning someone else's approval or validation, especially not if that validation is conditional and fleeting. It comes, Schopenhauer argued, from cultivating internal sources of strength and worth. He pointed to three core pillars for men seeking this kind of liberation: economic sovereignty, philosophical depth, and physical mastery. Think about what these mean. Economic sovereignty isn't just about being rich. It's about having the freedom that financial independence provides. Freedom from want. Freedom from being reliant on others in a way that compromises your integrity or your path. It gives you options and reduces the desperation that can lead to poor choices in relationships and in life. Philosophical depth, that intellectual rigor he championed, is your shield. It's the ability to think critically, to see beyond the surface narratives, the societal illusions, the romantic fantasies that can lead you astray. It's about understanding yourself, understanding human nature, its light and its shadows, and understanding the world as it is, not just as you wish it to be. This protects you from manipulation, from chasing ghosts, and from the pain of unmet, unrealistic expectations. And physical mastery? This isn't about vanity. Your physical body, Schopenhauer might say, is the vessel of your will, the tangible manifestation of your presence in the world. Cultivating physical strength, health and discipline is not just about looking good. It's about embodying vitality, resilience and the capacity for action. It reinforces that sense of internal power and self-command. When you diligently build these three pillars in your life, something remarkable begins to happen. You start to transcend that desperate, anxious pursuit of external approval, particularly female validation, that can consume so much energy and lead to so much heartache. Your center of gravity shifts from out there in the hands of others to in here within yourself. And here's the beautiful paradox Schopenhauer's philosophy hints at. When a man truly ceases to expect his fundamental happiness and sense of worth to come from women, when he builds his life on this solid foundation of internal strength, he often finds that respect and genuine attraction follow much more naturally. Not because he's now playing a cleverer game of pursuit, but because he emanates a different kind of energy, an energy of self-sufficiency, purpose, and quiet confidence. This is inherently attractive because it signals true value, not a performance designed to gain approval. Schopenhauer believed that the most dangerous lies are not the ones others tell us, but the ones we tell ourselves. The lie that a perfect, unconditional fairy tale love will solve all our problems. The lie that our worth is determined by someone else's affection. The lie that we can find lasting fulfillment by constantly seeking external validation. Genuine power, the kind that sustains you through life's inevitable challenges, emerges not from the illusion of conquering or possessing another person, but from the relentless, often difficult but ultimately rewarding process of conquering yourself. It comes from cultivating a purpose so compelling, a life so rich and self-directed, that female attention, while perhaps welcome, becomes incidental rather than essential. It's a byproduct of a life well lived, not the central goal. This perspective, sometimes called a red pill view in modern discourse, isn't about bitterness or cynicism for its own sake. It's an invitation to strip away the comforting illusions, to abandon the romantic fantasies that may have unknowingly held you captive, and to begin the crucial work of rebuilding your life around principles of truth, unflinching self-mastery, and an unshakable independence. It's about seeing the world and your place in it with clear eyes, and then choosing to build a life of substance, a life of genuine internal strength. It's a challenging path, no doubt, but perhaps it's the path to a more authentic and resilient form of happiness, one that isn't dependent on the shifting sands of another's approval, but is forged in the fire of your own becoming.